Okay, Ramsey, so you were saying something about single sessions versus multiple sessions. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, so single sessions I feel are not the full process. And I have seen there being a lot of success when we're able to give someone mental space to see something with clarity. And so that process for us is basically taking the emotional charge off of the subject and allowing someone to be in a state where they can now have that space to see things clearly, see things for what they are and not worse than they are. And when they have that space, then you can address what the change is. So for example, when someone comes in and they say, I want to lose weight, and you create an aversion to whatever food that they've been eating, they might take up some other habit that is not addressing what the core issue is of their suffering, and then you miss the entire seed. You miss resolving the seed and changing that for them. So that's why we don't do single session work, because in our experience, it's just not providing an honest service to people. It's putting a Band-Aid on it.
And you were saying something about, let's say someone comes in and they're mostly ready to make the change, but maybe they're not 100% ready. There's still some hesitation or reluctance or uncertainty. You mentioned that, having more than one session gives them some space, like you just said a moment ago, but really it takes the pressure off them. I really appreciated when you said that.
Yeah, probably the best way to describe it, I view every person as a different old television set. And for those that are aware of old television sets or old radios, you used to have to tune the television to the channel and move the antenna around until you got the clarity of the picture, or you had to tune the radio and turn the dial until you were right on that frequency. And so everyone has different, they have a different closeness or distance away from being tuned 100%. So when someone comes in and says, oh yeah, I know Bob, and he resolved his issue in one session, to me what that is the person is closer to being tuned to having clarity.
Bob is that closer.
That's correct. And so you might have someone else who's 100 miles away from being tuned to have that clarity. So the work we do with them helps them to tune themselves to get closer to where they can see something clearly, it's unemotional, and then they can address what the real issue is, which, from our perspective, most of our suffering is a result of we either are not good enough, or we feel like there's not enough stuff and not enough around us. There's a scarcity of love, there's a scarcity of money, of whatever, of significance or certainty. And that difference easily is summarized with what is the level of certainty that a person has, what is the level of conviction a person has in this change that they want. Because the person can come in and say, I want to change, but I don't really believe I can change. And they're not tuned.
They're not aware.
They're not aware, and they're not tuned enough to know how far they are and how much of a gap that we have to close with context, so with education,
Yep.
to help them have that right exact frequency and be right on it. And then they have the awareness, and then they'll make the decision. Because everyone wants to live an abundant life. Everyone wants to feel love and acceptance. And we just have all these filters that are going on. So each person has a different level of conviction. And just to give a very clear definition of conviction, and one that will resonate with almost everyone. When I say conviction, I mean with absolute certainty. Like you're willing to bet your life that you are so sure about something that you're willing to put your life on the line. That's the level of conviction that change happens. Not like somewhere in between is you're not going to get the change yet. So a person that's going to change quickly is a person that has absolute conviction that something is going to happen. They've decided in their mind it's going to happen, and it's just a matter of I need help to see perspective.
Right.
And that's the difference right there.
So just as a very brief example to see if I understand you correctly, That's why people, when they suffer some kind of major health crisis, like a heart attack or a stroke, and they survive, oftentimes they will change their behavior very dramatically, because all of a sudden they saw their life flash before their eyes, and now smoking is no longer an option. Eating excessively is no longer an option, because they have that clarity and that conviction you talked about a moment ago.
Yeah, that's a great example. Not everyone experiences that. I've known many people that have had
Right.
multiple heart attacks, and their health is not their leverage. Something else is their leverage.
And by
So-
leverage, you mean something. Leverage, you mean something that is highly motivating and compelling to get them to change.
That's
right?
a good word. Very compelling. It's a catalyst.
Like kids
to
are
get 'em to
usually
change.
people's leverage.
Absolutely.
Or
A higher mission.
higher mission,
purpose.
higher purpose, right?
Exactly.
And so when people come to us and they say, you know, I want to do this in one session because my friend did it or my mom did it or whatever, what they're not appreciating is the fact that they don't know all the details of their friends or their mom's
Yes.
inner workings, their mind, their mindset, their emotional state when their friend or family member made that change in a day.
Yeah, because most of that stuff is very personal, and those subtleties of the details never come out in a phone call or a passing conversation,
Right.
where someone said, "Oh yeah, I did this," but what's all the backstory to
Right.
that? And that's not something that that we are gonna back our commitment to our clients
Right.
based off of not having all the information, because it's a disservice to them, and it's a disservice to the community, the profession.
Yeah.
So that's why we have a process of removing that energy, helping someone tune themselves. They can get closer to that absolute conviction, and once they have that, tying in whatever their catalyst for change is, their reason, their higher purpose, their higher mission, tying that into the reason for change or that decision to change.
Yep.
It's easy after that.
So our work, if I'm going to use your words here, our work is a process of helping people tune in
Yeah.
to what is most compelling, most motivating, most important to them, and in a way that ensures that they're successful, rather than, crossing our fingers, hoping and praying that whatever we do in one session is the right thing at the right time and the client is in the right mental space, and then it may or may not all line up, like the stars may or may not align.
Absolutely. And the other thing that's interesting is that when you think of, well, I want this done in one session, it's impossible to expect a provider to do something to basically to facilitate someone else's awareness in one session, when half of that work, half of that effort, half of that ability to allow oneself to be tuned is the responsibility of the client. So
you have to be open.
You have to be open. You have to be willing to be part of the process, to follow what it is that you're experiencing, to let yourself tune in. And it's not a math equation that makes sense to expect someone to give you a result in one session when half of the participation or half of the equation is the collaborative effort between the provider and the client.
Yep.
You can't provide a guarantee when you don't know, and you can't control the circumstances the other person's going to experience.
Right.
It's-
Well, and I mean, there are people that have done it, so I want to honor them and acknowledge them. But at the same time, there's a kind of a perception that because it worked for some people in one session, that therefore it shall work for every person in one session, or it should work for every person in one session.
Right.
Because of all these different factors that you just discussed, right?
Yeah, and everyone's been through different experiences in life. They've given those different experiences different meaning. Just from my past, some people go into a combat situation and they're really affected by it negatively. Other people go into it and they view it as a catapult or a catalyst to go do other things and give back. Everyone's different, and the meaning we give things and the experiences that we have are all different. So you can't cookie cutter people and smash square peg into round hole, because it's not going to be it's not in the best interest of the client to do so.
Right. So you're saying you can't make assumptions that just because someone has experienced something that you automatically know the meaning that they took away from that experience. And so it takes a little bit of time to unpack and unwrap that client's life in a way that allows you to help them change, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the reason it's not done, a person doesn't do it for themselves, is because they would have already done that.
Right.
They would have already done that, and this is in our normal vernacular, in our normal colloquialisms, we call it our blind spots, and everybody has them.
Yeah.
Everyone has blind spots, even top performing athletes, top performing individuals, top performing whatever. They all have them, and we all have them. But recognizing that you do have them is scary for people. It's scary for someone to recognize that they don't have it all figured out,
Yeah.
or that they are they're not doing something the way that they should be doing. That's a very, very difficult thing for people to experience, is to look into the mirror and go, I'm not where I want to be in my life. And because you have to answer to yourself when you do that.
Yep.
And it's always easier to externalize the responsibility of achieving, the responsibility of creating, to something external. Because when it doesn't go right, then we can easily go, see, it's because that didn't go right that I'm where I am. And that won't lead to a life of fulfillment.
Right. And so, I appreciate you sharing your thoughts. We were just having a conversation over lunch, and I thought, you know what, you're saying something really important that I'd like to put out there to other people
Absolutely.
who have asked this question. And so thanks for answering it on video.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.